People often say that the bonds of blood are stronger than those of water. But what if the blood betrays you? What if the person who shared your cradle ends up stealing your world? My name is Jonah, and this is the story of how I lost everything to my sister. Karma penned the last chapter not through retaliation, but through the passage of time. It begins in a quiet corner of Oregon, where our family ran a small apple orchard for 3 generations. My sister Eliza and I were inseparable, climbing trees, chasing crows, inventing kingdoms in the mist. The orchard wasn't just soil and trees, it was the rhythm of our childhood, the breath of our family history. We grew up under sunburnt skies and rainy Novembers, our hands stained with juice and dirt. Every October, Dad held a harvest festival. Lanterns lit the orchard paths. Neighbors came with guitars, laughter echoing like magic. It felt eternal. But even as kids, Eliza had a hunger in her eyes I didn't understand. While I memorized the scent of blossoms, she memorized numbers. She had a way of speaking that made adults nod. She had a knack for smiling when no one else was around. Our father, a gentleman with soil under his nails and poems in his pockets, used to say, "The orchard doesn't need to grow big, it just needs to grow right." When he died suddenly and cruelly from a heart attack, it felt as if the orchard itself stopped breathing. I remember the silence. The trees appeared to hunch down, attentively listening. I thought grief would bind us. But Eliza changed. Her sadness was sharp, calculating. While I wept in the barn, she was already meeting bankers. She said we had to modernize, invest, expand. She called it legacy. I called it greed. A week later, I found a contract with my forged signature. She had mortgaged the orchard. Without me. I confronted her in the kitchen, the same place we had once fought over the last slice of pie. Her back was to me, hands calm as she poured tea. "It's just business, Jonah," she said, her voice flat. "You never had the stomach for it." The words sliced deeper than I expected. I wanted to shout. Instead, I looked at the window at the tree where we had buried our childhood dog. There were cracks in the ground. She said it was a joint venture with a real estate developer. "They'll build eco-lodges. They will also construct a boutique farm. You'll see it'll be beautiful." But her voice trembled just once. I hired lawyers. I thoroughly examined the county records. But Eliza had planned meticulously. Every loophole, every waiver. The court sided with her. Half the land was legally hers. I remember the day the men came. The bulldozers arrived at dawn. I stood beside the old Macintosh row, heart-pounding fingers, digging into bark. And then I walked away. Eliza, 10 years old, and I hid in the barn amid a thunderstorm. She clutched my hand and whispered, "Promise we'll always protect this place." I did. I kept it. She didn't. That night I packed my things. But I left behind one thing she didn't know still held power. Before I left, I climbed into the attic of the farmhouse. Dust drifted like forgotten memories. There behind old quilts and Christmas boxes was Dad's locked chest oak, iron-edged, the kind only he had the key to. I found a loose panel in the rafters where he'd stashed the key long ago. Inside journals, old land deeds, a photograph of Mom laughing with flour on her face, and one folded envelope. The envelope held a codicil to the will, dated but unsigned. The pages trembled in my hands. Dad's scrawl was unmistakable. It said he had changed his mind. The orchard was to go to me unconditionally, to preserve, not profit. He hadn't trusted Eliza's ambition. I sat on the floor for hours. The sun rose and cast lines of light across the dust in the attic. I read every word twice. While Dad and I counted constellations under the stars, he whispered, "She's clever, Jonah, but you're the one who understands roots." Occasionally, the truth waits in silence in boxes sealed not with locks, but with hope. I walked away from the house with the codicil in my pocket and a vow I hadn't made in years. This wasn't over. Montana was never part of the plan. It just happened a bus route, a cheap trailer, a town no one had heard of. I found work hauling lumber, then fixing fences, then nothing at all. Days passed in silence. I lived off instant coffee and canned beans. Nights were the hardest. Too quiet. Too honest. I planted a small garden in the back. Tomatoes, mostly. They struggled in the rocky soil just like I did, but tending to them gave me something to believe in, something to control. The orchard felt like a dream fading at the edges. I stopped speaking to Eliza, blocked her number, never looked back. But every year on the anniversary of Dad's death, I wrote a letter to the orchard. I'd describe the weather, my garden, and the dreams I had where he still hummed lullabies. Then I'd burn the letter and scatter the ashes into the wind, as if they'd find their way back to the soil he loved. One year something changed. The letter didn't burn. The flame flickered, hissed, then died. I stared at the half-scorched page. The words are still visible. Something in me shifted, as if the fire itself had refused to let go. That was the same year the lawsuit made headlines. An environmental group filed an injunction against Eliza's project. Turns out the land wasn't zoned properly. There were violations: wetland drainage, illegal pesticide use, and someone had sent them a photocopy of the codicil. Not me, but someone. Years ago, I testified at a local zoning hearing in court, my father standing beside me. He'd whispered, "You can't fight the earth and expect to win. You can leave a place, you can bury the pain, but some roots are deeper than distance." A letter arrived with Eliza's name on the return address. I left it unopened. For now, I opened the letter at dawn. Her handwriting hadn't changed. Slanted, deliberate, like she was still trying to control the shape of the world. She asked me to testify, said the orchard was in danger of being seized and that my voice might change the outcome. I almost tore it in two, but something held me. Maybe it was the orchard. Maybe it was the memory of Dad's voice. Maybe I just needed to look her in the eye one more time. The county courthouse hadn't changed. Still smelled like old wood and rain. I sat on a bench in the back watching Eliza speak with her lawyer. She looked thinner, more angular. Her eyes flicked to mine, once then away. They called me to the stand. My palms were sweating. I reached into my coat and pulled out the codicil, held it like a compass. The judge adjusted his glasses. "You understand this document is unsigned?" I nodded. "But it's his handwriting. He read it to me the week before he passed." Eliza's lawyer objected. Hearsay, but the judge allowed it, said context mattered. Dad and I were in the barn as the twilight filtered through the dust. He held the codicil like it was a seed. "If anything happens, this place needs you more than her. Justice doesn't always roar. Occasionally it whispers. Justice speaks through paper, through memory, and through silence broken at the right moment." When the session ended, the judge didn't make a ruling. He froze all development, placed the orchard in temporary conservatorship. Eliza was furious. She didn't speak to me as she passed. 3 days later, she showed up at my trailer. Her hair was drenched from the rain, hands empty, eyes wide. She stood on my porch, drenched and silent like a ghost from a story I never wanted to finish. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The rain hit the tin roof in soft, apologetic taps. I lost everything she said, barely above a whisper. Her condo had been seized. The developers pulled out. Banks wanted their money. Her friends disappeared. She had no savings, no home, and no illusions left. I stepped aside. She entered like she was crossing into foreign land. I made her tea, the same way Mom used to 2 spoons of honey, no lemon. Muscle memory. Her hands trembled as she held the cup. We didn't talk about the orchard. We didn't talk about the hearing. We talked about tomatoes, about the stubborn raccoon that kept raiding my compost bin, about silence and how loud it can be. That night I gave her my bed and slept on the floor. In the dark I heard her cry. Not loud, not for pity. Just quiet sobs like something breaking down in a place no one else could reach. The next morning she handed me a manila folder. Her eyes were puffy. Her voice was hoarse. I had the deed rewritten, transferred fully to you. No catches, no tricks. Just, I can't carry it anymore. Inside was the legal transfer, signed, notarized, final. I didn't say thank you. That word felt too small. As children, we were constructing a treehouse in the oldest oak tree. She'd drawn blueprints with crayons. I had hammered the first nail. "We'll live here forever," she'd said. Some debts aren't paid with money. Some are paid in moments of collapse. She made the decision to give up her pride. She asked if she could come with me. "Let's head back to the orchard together." Her intention was not to take possession of it. I am simply there to observe its beauty. We drove in silence. The truck groaned under the weight of forgotten things. I watched her fingers trace raindrops on the window like she was trying to read the past. The orchard came into view just before sunset, overgrown, wild, trees knotted with vines, fences collapsed, the barn roof sagged like an old man's shoulders. Eliza stepped out first. Her boots sank into soft moss. She walked toward the old Macintosh row, now more weeds than apples. Her hand brushed a trunk slow and reverent. "This is where Dad caught me sneaking cigarettes," she said. I smiled. "And where you made me swear not to tell." During the first week, we focused on clearing brush. I chopped and she raked. The rhythm returned like an old song. We didn't talk much. We didn't require any conversation. Neighbors stopped by. Some I hadn't seen in years. They brought old tools and stories. One man, Mr. Jenkins, pressed a rusted wrench into my hand. "Your dad lent me the tool in '88. Thought it belonged here." Eliza kept a notebook. She drew plans for restoration. Eliza drew diagrams in pencil just as she did with crayons. But this time, she handed the book to me. "It's your call," she said. "I just want to help. Me and Dad are watching the sunrise from the ridge." He said, "Land forgives Jonah. Work with it, if you listen. Rebuilding isn't about replacing what was. It's about honoring what mattered and letting go of what didn't." I found her sleeping beneath the old pear tree one morning. She'd brought a blanket. She also carried a book containing her father's poems. She was still asleep when I brought coffee out. She was curled under the old quilt that Mom had made from flannel shirts. Her breath was slow calm, something I hadn't seen in her for years. When she woke, she didn't speak. She simply gazed at the sky through branches that had not yet blossomed. "I didn't know how to stop," she said finally. "The deals, the pressure. It kept moving, and I didn't know how to get off the ride." I didn't answer right away. I poured her coffee. We sipped our coffee as we had done 100 times in childhood, but this moment felt different. "You could have stopped before you forged my name," I said. "I know." Her voice cracked. She looked at the dirt. She grabbed a twig and started drawing invisible lines. I thought I was doing what Dad wanted. I was determined to make my work significant. I was determined to make it last. "I thought you were afraid." I admitted, but not of growth, of losing what mattered. We sat in silence. Bees buzzed in the distance. A dog barked somewhere down the road. "Do you hate me?" she asked. "No," I said, but I did, for a long time. We embarked on our final bike ride prior to Dad's heart attack. She pedaled ahead fast and fearless. I lagged behind, cautious. She laughed over her shoulder. "Catch up, slow poke. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It just lets you carry it without bleeding." She reached into the book of poems and pulled out a photo, Dad holding a baby Eliza, smiling like he'd never known a lie. She handed it to me. "Maybe we start again?" she asked. I nodded. "Only if you help me plant the new Macintosh row." Autumn came slowly, like a breath held too long. Despite its patchy and scarred appearance, the orchard began to show signs of life. New shoots sprouted. The ground softened. Birds returned. We spent weeks replanting. Macintosh, Gala. We planted a handful of Honeycrisps for the future, each tree placed with care like a memory buried and reborn. Kids from the town came on weekends. We taught them how to prune branches, how to spot early blight, and how to listen to the soil. One boy no older than 10 stared up at me and asked, "Did you always know you'd come back?" I smiled. "No, but the orchard did." Eliza started baking again. Apple pies that tasted like October and an apology. She laughed more. Sometimes she laughed softly as if unsure whether she was allowed to do so. I caught her reading Dad's journals in the barn. Her fingers hovered over the pages like they were fragile glass. I didn't interrupt. We hosted a harvest day. We held a harvest celebration reminiscent of those from our early years. Lanterns, guitars. Even Mr. Jenkins sang off-key and full of spirit. Neighbors came with casseroles and cider. They brought stories too, some about Dad, some about us. At the end of the night, Eliza and I stood beneath the pear tree. "He would have liked this," she said. Yeah, I nodded. He would have. Dad lifted me onto his shoulders, pointing to the stars. "Everything worth keeping grows slowly," he said. "Redemption doesn't always come in grand gestures. Occasionally, it's in pie crust. Pruning shears can also bring redemption. The hands are often soiled with hope. A man approached us after the event, an agent for a conservation trust. He offered to buy the orchard. To protect it forever, he said. I looked at Eliza. She shook her head. Not for sale. The morning after harvest day, I walked the rows alone. Dew clung to my boots. The orchard smelled like damp leaves and beginnings. A soft fog hung low like the land was catching its breath. At the edge of the property, beneath the oldest tree, the one Dad planted when he married Mom, I knelt down with a spade. From my coat, I pulled a letter. This one I didn't burn. Dear Dad, it took me years to understand what you meant about roots. I thought it was just about trees. But now I know it's about people. About pain. About the kind of love that forgives even when it doesn't forget. She came back, Dad, and she stayed. Not to take, to tend, to try. I means it. The orchard's healing, so are we. I folded the letter and placed it into the soil, pressing it deep as if planting a seed. Behind me, Eliza stood barefoot in the grass, a mug of coffee in her hand. She didn't speak, just nodded. Years ago, we were all together at a picnic. Dad was playing the harmonica. Mom was swaying barefoot in the grass, and Eliza and I were laughing heartily, our lips stained with cider. By Betrayal. Just breathlight and music. This poem isn't a story of revenge. It's a story of return, of rot and regrowth, of karma choosing to prune, not destroy. Blood may betray, but the roots remember, and sometimes if the soil is willing, even the broken can bloom again.